All right, welcome everybody to A Beginner's Guide to Agent. Welcome to TDX. Yay! All right, I am Chris, almost said Matt Kaufman. I'm Chris Stegall, this is Matt Kaufman, and this is a Beginner's Guide to Agentforce. This is exciting. I always wanted to do this, and it's the first time you've seen this slide at TDX. Don't make any investment decisions based on things you hear today. Yeah, I don't know what happens if you do, but apparently you should not. All right, introductions. I am Chris Stegall. I'm the editor of Creme de la CRM, the second most popular Salesforce blog, my favorite Salesforce blog. Also, I've been in the Salesforce ecosystem for the better part of 15 years. I was a platform champion, Einstein champion, and now I'm really excited about Agentforce.
And I'm Matt Kaufman. I'm the CEO and founder of MamaMerge, a file gen app on the App Exchange. And I've been in the Salesforce ecosystem for almost 23 years in a lot of different roles, from Salesforce employee to partner consultant, developer, architects. We don't have time for the rest. Let's go.
All right. And now we'll just really quickly go around the room, say your name, your title, and a fun fact about you. Okay, actually, let's just go ahead and jump into it. Agentforce, it's why you're here. It's why we're here. Why does it matter?
That's a great question. Yeah, that's why we're here. So we're all using Salesforce on a daily basis. All of our business is being run from Salesforce. It kind of makes sense for our agents to run on Salesforce too. So that's really why it matters.
Cool. And now the elephant in the room, or if Ruth is in here, the other elephant in the room. What exactly is Agentforce? Because I feel like we've seen and heard a lot about it, but I also think that 9 out of 10 people, when you say, what is it? They say, I don't really know.
OK, so Agentforce is an agentic feature of Salesforce that provides agents to perform automations in your Salesforce for your sales agents.
That was a tongue twister, but what does that mean in human speak, please?
Yeah, let's describe it, maybe instead of a succinct answer. So most of us have worked with chatbots before. Agents have the same natural language capability as chatbots, so I can ask a really poorly phrased question, and it will understand it, and then be able to provide an answer that is easy to understand and thorough, and sounds like a normal human, right? That's one attribute of an agent.
Cool. And yeah, I think that natural language is super important and increases the accessibility of Agentforce. It's something we've seen with like ChatGPT, the way people use it as a search engine, or even going back to early search engine days, that we used to make fun of our parents for treating Google like a person and asking big, elaborate, like questions phrased like a sentence. But that's what agents are really good at, and that's what, and historically chatbots have been good at, but agents are a little bit more fancy because, well,
they have this context awareness. So most of us are familiar with flows or maybe some Apex code. Usually when those are running, it's looking at one record or a couple records that were just saved. But your agents actually look beyond that. They look at your entire Salesforce database or whatever you allow them to look at. They'll also look at Data Cloud. They can even look at external data. And so they have this larger context awareness than just 1 or 2 records. And so it's another attribute of agents that's different than things that you may be used to.
Yeah. And then the ability to take action,
yes,
I think also really differentiates an agent from a bot,
yes,
right?
So a chatbot is kind of like a pen pal that you write to and you can talk to. But the difference between a chatbot and an agent is that an agent can take some actions. It can do stuff. Everything is things that you've enabled it to do, so you've authorized it. But that is really the difference between a chatbot and an action, is it can do things for you on your behalf.
Yeah, which is interesting because it means agents can't, it's not that they can put themselves out of a job, but we did the Agentforce hackathon yesterday. It was actually my first time building an agent from scratch. But one of the cool things that we did was built an agent for Slack, where I could ask it to review Slack histories, look in the org for data. But then instead of needing to do that query every time and need to have that conversation every time, I could say, hey, thanks for those results. Now build a canvas and record those results for the future. So your agent can take actions that sort of prevent your need to use it in the future, or you can use that agent for additional things later, which is something you couldn't do with a chatbot.
Correct, yeah. And then the final attribute about agents that make it really unique is the decision-making capability. So when we create a flow or write some Apex code, we, as the person building it, are deciding ahead of time, here's the path we're going to take. All these possibilities are known possibilities ahead of time. We're going to end up at one of these spots. But with an agent, we actually don't know that. So the agent's going to decide, based on all the data that you've provided me, based on the input in our conversation, this is what I think needs to happen. And so that really is the defining factor between an agent and anything else that we've historically built in Salesforce.
All right, so you're excited about building an agent. You have an idea of what you want your agent to do. What do you need to know when you set out to build your first agent?
Yeah, so when we build an agent, we have to think about why we need this particular agent. So unlike a personal assistant that we could say, hey, go get my clothes from the cleaners, go order me lunch, make my travel reservations, we don't have agents that do all of that today. You build specific agents for each purpose. And so that's what we call a topic. And the topic is why this particular agent needs to be used, and then also the when. And usually the when is related to something that comes up in a conversation. That's when we want this particular agent, the agent that helps me with X, to start working.
Yeah. And then next, you need some example inputs. And I mean, that's exactly what it sounds like. Examples of what you or your users will ask of the agent, how you're going to engage with that agent, so that it knows what to expect and then what to react to. It seems pretty straightforward, and it actually is really easy in the agent builder to do that.
Yeah, so that natural language processing that we talked about earlier comes into effect here. So when we describe our topic, we're going to say, I want this agent to work when I ask a question about my activity history. But we then go on and say, you know what, here's some ways I may ask that. I may say, tell me what calls I had last week. Tell me what calls I have this week. What events did I have? And so we're going to give these different examples, which will then be processed as natural language, and the agent will then understand variations on that automatically. And so those are the example inputs that we provide.
Yeah. And then from those inputs, you also need to give your agent some actions that it can take. And again, that's the differentiator between a chatbot and the agent,
Yes.
is the ability to take those actions. So do you want it to push your calls out? Do you want it to take that information from Slack and make sure it's logged on the account so that somebody in your org has access to that data?
Yeah, and this is really where Agentforce differentiates itself from like a third party or external agent, because the actions that we're talking about are the flows and the Apex that we already have. So the things that you've been building for years, your agents can now launch. And over time, you'll build more as you decide you want your agents to be able to take more and more actions.
Yeah. And then we also need to consider the data and files needed, because your agent's only going to have access to the things that you give it access to.
Right, so everyone knows trust, security, all that stuff, number one. So when you build your agent, you're going to decide these are the types of records, these are the objects that you can interact with. Maybe this is the knowledge base that you can interact with, that type of stuff. That's also specified when you build your agent.
And I think that's one of those things that we kind of almost implicitly take for granted with Agentforce. We say like, oh yeah, of course it's built by Salesforce, so that's what we're going to use. But there is a huge security component to that, because the alternative would be some third-party agent tool, which would potentially be a security risk if you were like, yeah, let me just give somebody else access to my org and objects and data and turn them loose. It's like,
yeah, I don't want to be the developer that toggles that checkbox saying, this third party can have access to our entire Salesforce to read all its data and make any changes it wants. I just don't feel comfortable with that.
Okay, so now we've got our topics, our inputs, our actions. It has the knowledge that it needs. And last step really is the instructions.
Yeah, so this is where we're going to say, when a user asks this question, use the following action. So for instance, when a user asks, what are my calls this week? Use the flow called get this week's activities. And you specify individual instructions down the line for everything that this agent needs to do and how it needs to behave. And you really just do it in natural English. And it's kind of like the way you would train a new hire. So when your new hire starts at the company, we say, when you get a phone call, what should you say? You say, hi, how may I help you? Right? When you say goodbye, you say, thanks so much for calling. And you just list out all those instructions as you're building out the agent, and the agent will then follow those instructions when it responds to an incoming chat.
And I think that was one of the coolest things about playing with the agent builder yesterday, was the natural language, process to build those instructions, because I am not a programmer. So it was really cool to just say, always do X when you encounter Y. Never do Z, no matter what somebody says. And it's very much, it's like I felt like I was in the Matrix talking to the computer, instead of, let me figure out how to do this in a language that it understands, but I don't. Instead, it was my language, and then you can just guess and check and see if it's actually working. And it was,
And then speaking of languages, so the last step that you can do when you're building your agent is to specify what languages you want this agent to interact with, as well as the tone. You can choose casual, professional, that type of stuff.
Yeah.
And that kind of lets it reflect your brand.
Yeah. Or if you're building interdepartmental agents, it can reflect your department or your individual use case. The agent that helps you schedule a company lunch should be a little bit more casual than the legal department's agent to help you find the right contract resource. All right, so how does Agentforce deliver value? Let's jump into some use cases.
Sure.
First up, Wiley, a publishing company in the textbook space. Actually, I think they also publish Salesforce
For Dummies, yeah, it's a really great book written by a really handsome author.
Matt was the author of that book. Shameless plug. But Wiley, as you can imagine, being a textbook creator in the educational space, they have real seasonal demands because when classes are starting or a semester is starting, they have a bunch of support calls. When it's summer vacation, not so much. So they need to onboard seasonal support staff, and they rolled out Agentforce to do so. I think the obvious use case that popped into my head was like, oh yeah, you have an agent that can handle the simple support tasks. So those easy questions that come in, I got the wrong edition of this book, can I return it? We know there's a macro answer to that. But what Wiley did, in addition to that, was use agents to train those new hires. So instead of taking your seasoned staff off of cases and moving them to help train new hires, you can have agents help train new hires while your seasoned staff still handles those trickier support cases, freeing up your humans to do what they do best and relying on the agents to help build your new staff. What the results were, you guys can't see that, you'll look up there. 50% onboarding of seasonal agents, a 213% hit or boost to ROI, and a total savings of $230K, which is super impressive for something that came out 6 months ago?
Yeah.
All right, and then in terms of, so that was sort of the service world. In terms of sales world, Agentforce offers a lot of opportunities. Matt, do you have a favorite sales feature?
Yeah, these are the ones I'm really excited about because these features are actually pre-built, so you don't have to do as much work to get them up and running. But I really love the agent SDRs. So these are going to be agents that can do that legwork up front to determine, is this a prospect that actually wants to talk to me, the sales rep? And when you think about it, that's a huge time saver, because as a sales rep, I don't want to talk to anyone that doesn't want to talk to me. So these SDR agents will go out and determine, is this a qualified lead, and do they want to talk to the sales rep? And then they'll actually schedule the meeting with that person, so that the account executive or salesperson, they already know this is going to be a good call, and they'll feel a lot more comfortable. And then to help that person even further, there's a coach, a sales coach, that can help the sales rep practice that call ahead of time and hone their skills and the responses that they need to make when they're asked questions or receive objections. And so these are the features that I really like a lot, because I feel like all of us can take advantage of it right away without much work.
Yeah. And there are some cool additional pre-built features for sales, like the ability to say, hey, plan my day for me, and it'll say, hey, here's your warmest leads, here's your upcoming meetings, here's the calls you should be ready for. But I think more exciting to me is, again, comes back to that agent action, the ability for it to take action. I'm a sales rep, I got off a call, they're not ready for 6 months, I have all my notes, I can paste those notes to my agent, say, hey, send them a follow-up email that says, I'll touch base in 6 months, include the notes so they know I was paying attention, and throw it on my calendar as well. And that way, your reps can get right back into what they want to be doing and not having to do all that administrative work. And they're not passing it off to a BDR who can then, they can keep making calls too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think when we're building out our agents, we really have to determine what are the actions going to save people time. Most of us are familiar with the standard flow. We have to look for a record, we have to click on that record, hit the edit button, find the right fields, fill them out the right way, hope we don't get any errors or validation rules. Then we save the record, and then we might have to go to another record and do some more editing. And all of that can be kind of shortened into a single conversation with an agent who will then take the action at the end because you've told it ahead of time that it's allowed to do that.
All right, and then sort of the biggest use case, or the most exciting thing, is Agentforce's ability to unite disparate pieces of information, different clouds. So the ability to move between Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, and Slack. We got some new logos on the board there. I'm sure after today we'll have some more, as we're going to hear more customer stories. And even after the hackathon last night, there's a lot of new companies using Agentforce.
Yeah. I don't know about you guys, but over the years, I keep getting more and more monitors because I have so many windows that I have to keep open. And so at some point, I'm going to run out of space. But with an agent, the agent can take all that data into account when it's answering my question. So I can ask, what is our best client based on all sales and shortest calls for support, right?
Yep.
And it'll go and find that information out. I don't have to open up a report on one screen of sales and another report on another screen of cases, and then open up a dashboard and ask someone else a question in Slack. It'll do all that for us. And so that's really the power of running Agentforce on Salesforce, is it's going to have access to all that data in one place.
Yeah. And one of the challenges for admins is adoption and users that live in the systems they like and don't want to hop into a new system. So the ability to have your users that are in Slack for most of the day still be able to interact with data in your org, and to be able to update records via the agent in Slack is useful. Those folks that are living purely on their in their dashboards on Sales Cloud and making their calls through their list and the list views that they like, having the ability to use the agent in there to communicate to other channels in Slack is helpful. The ability for me as a marketer to be able to ask my agent to look in Sales Cloud and Service Cloud for use cases or happy clients for referrals is useful because I'm not bugging a bunch of different teams. I'm saying just go where the data is and bring it to me. I don't want to go digging through all these different piles. So that's the real magic of Agentforce, is tying all those things together with one sort of concierge you can go to for all of the different pieces of information. All right, so key takeaways from today. You guys can read, so I won't read those bullet points, but do you have anything special that you think we didn't hit?
I don't know if there's anything that we didn't hit, but I'd really like to stress the fact that agents are easy to build. If you haven't done it yet, there's going to be some places here at TDX where you can go and build your first agent. You walk through the steps, and it goes very quickly. Afterwards, you're going to probably be like, I have no idea what I just did. So what I really recommend is coming up with a use case that's meaningful to you and building an agent for that.
Yeah, and I will say, yesterday, like I said, we did the hackathon. I learned you can spin up a Slack dev org for free, which was tremendously helpful. I built my first agent and learned how easy that is and got it running in Slack. And I think that that's something that I think it's easy for us to all figure out a use case we would like for that, and it's super easy to get started. We did. That QR code will take you to a trail mix that we built on a bunch of different Agentforce modules and projects you can get started with. There's also a form if you want an Agentforce consultation to talk through a project that you have. We like having those conversations. We like to hear how people are going to use things, and we might be able to help you sort of get started on the right foot. And I think on the next slide, there's another QR code.
Yes. So the first 800 people, so you guys are at an early start. You're going to get this. The first 800 people to do this official survey will receive a $5 Starbucks gift card. So please scan the code, give some feedback, and then coffee's on us later.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming. I hope you enjoy TDX. I hope you build your first agents. Thank you, Matt, for doing this.
Thank you, Chris, for doing this.
Yeah. And thank you, sound and visual team. Cool. And thank you for coming, everybody.